This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Become a patron today at patreon.com/into the portal.
Hello, and welcome back into the portal. I'm Amber Ray.
And I'm Andrew McKay. And welcome everyone to the first ever ITP Film Friday installment.
Yeah.
So, yeah, here we are.
We're
covering a film.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, it's a
happening.
thing. We've had a couple of beers. We've watched the movie.
I literally have had one drop of beer.
What? Oh, it's a cider. It's a cider.
And then now I'm on to a cider.
Yeah.
Anyways, that is irrelevant.
Okay,
what we're here to discuss tonight is a fantastically creepy film, perfect for the Halloween season.
Yeah, definitely.
And that would be
The Witch. Mm-hmm. So a 2015 film. And we put this out on social media beforehand, so just to reiterate again, definitely spoilers.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely spoilers.
For sure.
Because this came out in 2015.
Yeah.
So spoilers are abound in this episode. But no, we
probably always will be.
we love films, and everything in the genre of the paranormal and horror and things like that are huge inspirations for the regular Into the Portal episodes that we do. Especially, it kind of all started with us, I think, with like older stuff. Like we got on to YouTube and we're watching like old 1940s sci-fi and horror and stuff like that. And then this was before we were doing the show. At least for me anyway, I kind of remember us doing that, and then we started watching the In Search ofs and those types of things, and then got onto the other paranormal podcasts.
Well, you could even argue before that we definitely had some exposure to more paranormal type experiences, or not experiences, film experiences in university, because we took an awesome class.
Totally.
What was that called again? It was just like
horror, or no, what was it
horror
called?
and post-humanism in film or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was basically, it explored a lot of themes related to monstrosity, otherness, the abject.
Yeah.
So that is that which is wholly other, that to the extent that it creates a horror within oneself to kind of witness it. So something like Frankenstein would be a great example.
You see something that you just, you're familiar with it, yet you can't explain it at the same time.
It's human yet inhuman.
Right.
So very creepy. And
Definitely.
and obviously there was a big component of that talked about even just like post-humanism, so the idea, or even transhumanism, like cyborgs, like what is the human? Does the soul reside in the mind, in the body? Is it both? Can you separate consciousness? Can you upload consciousness? Like all these types of really cool questions.
Well, that is definitely more of a modern theme these days. Like when we were watching Black Mirror, that's like every episode and some of the later seasons of that show.
Yeah, that's a cool one.
Really cool. Mm-hmm. But anyway, tonight, I mean, we're getting into an aspect of all of this, but it's just definitely going back in time a little bit for this movie. Yeah,
and Dave Eggers, not Dave Eggers. Oh, definitely not Dave Eggers. That's an author. But Robert Eggers. Okay. I'm kind of wondering if there is some sort of familial connection there. But anyways, haven't looked into it.
That'd be interesting to see.
I wonder. But this was his directorial debut.
Right.
And it's funny, like he is kind of a weirdo. He really wanted it to be authentic. Like, he's one of those guys that's very, like, artsy with his films. Yeah. From what I've read, at least. Very, very little what I've read. But he actually considered this more of, like, a very mainstream film for him to make.
Really?
Yeah, he did. He actually... It was a genre film, obviously horror, whatever. Sure. But he didn't like to be pigeonholed, really.
Right.
But he wanted to be the most authentic version of the film he could be. So he worked a lot with the British museums overseas, and then, of course, over here in like the New England museums, things like that.
Yeah.
Just to make sure he got all of his sort of, his periods right, all the clothes, what they would have been eating, wearing, doing, everything.
Right. So really, did his due diligence with that, which I can really appreciate, especially when it comes to stuff like this.
Yes.
Why don't you give us a breakdown of the film?
Okay.
I know you have that ready.
I got it
so
ready.
Let's do that, and then we'll get into it.
All right. Well, it all starts in New England in 1630. The opening scene is basically a family getting banished from their community and their church. It's like a separatist type of thing. And they're forced to go and live off the land alone on the outskirts of a nearby wood.
Right.
That scene of them just like in their cart, hey, just trekking it into the open nothing.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't want to... I struggle with not like cracking jokes when it comes to like things like this because it's like
jokes all the time.
I know it's so hard, but it's just like literally that scene. It's so awesome and creepy because it's just like we'll talk about the sound in a second, but like the wailing sound as they start to like leave the village. But then I'm looking at it, I'm thinking like, hey guys, in about 200 meters, you're just gonna hit solid trees. Like, what are you gonna do with that cart? You're gonna have to get off that cart in like a couple 100 feet here, guys. Like, it's not
I know, right?
far.
But they're like, whatever, gonna take the ride for now.
Right.
And then there's that one really brief. This is very thematic for the director's style, where you see just a very brief image. It goes from that daylight scene of them, and it's a very long shot, a very long still shot, and then you get just another still shot that's very brief, very what's the word, like contrasting, I guess, okay. Right? And it's at night, and it's just the fire and them just alone in the woods.
Yeah.
And then it just goes right to the day.
Showing
and then
their vulnerability.
Exactly. And it's a really strange scene, too, the transition from that scene to the next, because that's when you get the father, William, with his face in the dirt. And you think he's, like, dead or something happened. Like, oh my gosh, like, the witch already got them. But he's actually just praying to the earth because they found their homestead, essentially.
Right. They found the spot, and they're all on that line, knelt down.
And that's very, like, there's something about how pious this guy was the entire time that just kind of rubs you the wrong way a little bit, you know?
Well, he rubbed the whole village the wrong way, so they kicked them out,
exactly,
basically.
So they left. And so, essentially, the film begins with this as the transition, and the sort of, opening scenes, and then tragedy strikes when the youngest son, infant Samuel, is snatched from the family in a bizarre instance in which he has been entrusted to the sole care of the eldest daughter, Thomasin. In a haunting scene of hide and seek, which is kind of very telling for the way the rest of the movie plays out, where the family is continuously seeking out a baby that they'll never find, that will always evade them.
Yeah.
Essentially, the family, so they lose this baby. Samuel is taken in an instant, and there's a very brief, scene, a camera shot, where you see an unknown, fast-moving figure cloaked in a dark shroud, but also cloaked in the forest around her, because the shot is taken from very far away, and you see the baby, crying, or you don't see the baby, but you hear the baby crying. Sorry, that was my way of but anyways, the most terrifying scene of the whole movie happens soon after. Hey,
right.
Have to agree.
Yeah.
Freaky man. All right, I'm gonna get into it.
Go for it.
I'm getting into it. Well, okay, there's a bit of a brief moment where you do see the family shown in mourning, essentially. And they're sort of going about their daily activities. You see the father and the eldest son going out to search the woods.
Yeah.
And this whole premise is that a wolf has taken the child. And the father actually lies about it. He says that he's seen wolf tracks.
Which he, of course, hasn't.
No.
Yeah.
Anyways, meanwhile, the witch is at work. You see a very close-up shot of Samuel being carefully placed like a prize pig on this worn surface. His naked, innocent body is wriggling as he smiles, looking about in the darkness around him. You see the witch in the background, preparing unknown instruments and substances. She caresses the child, then grabs hold of an object off screen. And then you see a long, jagged blade placed under Samuel's throat, across the surface of the young child's belly, and then cut to black.
Yeah.
So that's kind of,
And that is
that
essentially...
sets the stage for the whole
film. Really. So to come back to the beginning of when Samuel gets snatched away, I thought that was really well done, and obviously that's what they used for the trailer, for the theatrical trailer, where Thomasin is playing peekaboo with Samuel, and on the third round of peekaboo, she moves her hands, and the infant's gone, and I just love that she looks up, and of course the witch is so fast, and it makes you wonder, because there's a shape-shifting element to this story where the witch appears as multiple different creatures, and or can move without being seen, basically, right? And that was the scene, right? So she looks up, and you just see basically a little wisp of the tall grass, as if something had just passed by. But then the actual wood itself is, another 100 meters past that, yet it's already gone. It's out of her sight, gone. And then what you just described, where that long, wide angle shot, and it's a side, like it's from the side, as if you're watching like a race go by, and it's just this hunched over figure, it's just the most decrepit looking humanoid figure
with such an innocent crying, accompanying it as she
just kind of hobbling, which is funny, right? Because it's like you're there and gone in an instant, but then the next scene is like this hobbling hag like thing that can like almost hardly move.
Yeah,
So
that's interesting. It's almost like a trickster element for sure. But who are they trying to trick in that scene? You know what I mean? Like, or is she just giving up the facade?
Just giving up the facade.
Because there is definitely... Well, how many creatures does it transform into? There's the
rabbit.
The rabbit, that's a big one. The goat.
Well, there's the element of the goat. She doesn't transform into the goat.
Black Phillip isn't her. Yeah.
So Black Phillip...
Phillip is almost like Satan
We're kind of bouncing
himself.
all over right now, but I guess that's okay, because we're just discussing the movie and we're assuming that you guys have seen it. Black Phillip is, of course, the black goat, horned goat that the family has, that the two youngest children, Mercy and Jonas, are constantly playing with, and it seems so innocent in the early stages of the movie.
Playing with and communicating with.
Right, but of course you don't know that at the beginning of the movie.
You think they're just saying that, Black Phillip's saying that.
It's just kids talking to animals, right?
Yeah.
Like the same way I talk to the dog.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Of course, if I did that in 1630, that might not turn out so great.
And one day, if you come to me and say, "Oh, Stella told me this," I think I might be concerned.
Yeah, well, of course. She's not the sharpest knife in the drawer either, so if she told me anything profound, that would be the concerning part about that, I think. Not the fact she had spoken to me. But anyway.
Well, okay, so we've gotten to the point where the baby's taken. And now what we begin to see after that is sort of a gradual dissolution of the family to a certain degree. It's really interesting. Like, we discussed this and said, like, when we watched this the first time, it was way more effective as far as it being scary. But the second go around is a lot more interesting because you
notice a lot more.
You see more about the characters, right? You see kind of their shortcomings, their
sins.
The sins, exactly, especially the father. And you see, obviously, the brother coveting his sister in some scenes, and then he eventually succumbs to the trickery of the witch in the form of a whore. Yeah. You could argue.
He's, like fighting it, right? Like, he knows what he's feeling.
Because he's raised as a Puritan, whatever, like, settler in the New England era of, like, 1630. So, come on.
Right.
Like, you think one bad thought and you're automatically going to hell.
You see an ankle and that's it.
You see an ankle, yeah.
Put that in the bank, right?
Yeah. So after this scene, there are definitely some more important scenes as well. Like, I think we should maybe go back and forth with some of our favorites.
I am curious to see what your favorite scene was.
Oh gosh, like not favorite scene, but just like a few that kind of stood out.
Sure.
Along the path. I think one of the most telling scenes, I think, comes shortly after. Actually, a few things do happen in this scene. So essentially, So the father comes back and he ends up having a row with Black Phillip, he's running amok all over the goat. And so he ends up slipping, and Thomasin, the eldest daughter, is charged with the task of cleaning his pants. So she takes them down to the river and she's scrubbing them away and, doing what a good daughter should, like she's always doing. Yeah. And you even see in the very first scene of her character, it's her praying. as if she's like not good enough and that she wants to be better and she wants to be more involved in the faith and like whatever and be more holy and pious.
Yeah.
So like that's interesting, right? Because that's kind of her character setup.
Yeah.
But
she's kind of on the fence between the rest of the family or at least her parents, where she's like not. Yeah, she's not living up to the piousness of her.
But that's just it, though. Why? Like, how? Like, she's never done anything.
Bitch.
Well, but anyways, that's irrelevant, really.
Sorry.
But the point I was going to make was the scene itself, right? Like, she's doing a good deed, like she always does. She never really talks back. The only time she ever talks back is when she gets to her breaking point with her father, because he is in sin himself.
Right.
But anyways, we'll get to that. But essentially, she's there cleaning his clothes, and then you see the eldest son, Caleb, walk over, and then that's where you see him like kind of side glance and looking at her cleavage. He's like, oh no, I can't be doing this. But,
right.
And then she catches him, and she's all like, what? And whatever, but she doesn't get it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's that part of the scene too. But what I found to be the most interesting part is when Mercy, one of the fraternal twins that's constantly in communication with this Black Phillip character, the goat, which
is creepy as shit.
Which is really very interesting, but essentially she comes out with this notion that it's a witch who stole Samuel. And that is very, very interesting, because no one has suggested that at all at this point.
No.
Not even the crazily, like, religious parents that were like, oh, if our child was even taken by a wolf, it had to be the work of the devil, it had to be the work of a witch, because, like, what else would do this kind of evil or something?
Yeah, exactly.
But even they haven't gone there. So Mercy is the one that really introduces it, and it actually originates with Philip. So that, to me, is kind of an interesting point of note.
Like, Philip tells her that
exactly.
it was a witch, but then she also says, like, I've seen her about in her cloak in the woods.
Exactly.
Which is just, like, bone-chilling.
So that is very odd. And then you get the turnaround where essentially Mercy's trying to scare Thomasin, but then Thomasin gets up and she kind of starts to stand up for herself. And at first she's very austere, very, like she's on the ground. She looks very, whatever, she's all in white. Mm-hmm. But then as soon as she stands up, she kind of darkens a bit. And she's very, much more formidable. And she basically outright says she's a witch and that she's made a pact with the devil and all this stuff. And scares her sister, actually tackles her to the ground, which is like, it's kind of taking it a bit far. But I guess if you're angry and upset and whatever, then that's
She had it coming, really.
She kind of did, yeah. But I just thought that whole scene was very interesting, and I couldn't take my eyes off of their eyes, because their eyes were black. Like, you look at them, even Mercy's eyes are super dark. Like,
because they were already gone.
You think?
Okay. Well, yeah. Because they were already under the trance of Black Phillip.
I guess so, hey?
They were under some sort of demonic trance already. They're always prancing around, chanting. And
Black Phillip. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, like, The Shining-esque.
And that is very interesting you say that, because of the scene when eventually Caleb falls under the witch's spell as well, and they all three of them go down at once. That's weird.
Yeah.
And some people, like, you could chalk that up to, like, I originally just chalk that up to, like, oh, well, they're all the most innocent, so they're the most vulnerable and the most, like, open to that sort of susceptibility. Well,
that is always the most, like, frightening thing about these stories, and it's all, like, kind of, like, it takes away from the, well, of course, this is a folkloric tale, and they said that right at the beginning of the film. It's, like, it's very cool, actually, how they introduce it. It's, like, all in cursive, and it says, like, The Witch, a New England folk tale.
Yeah.
I thought that was really neat. It's presented like a fairy tale, like this, very much like the real fairy tales
it's like
that we know.
Aesop's Fable or something.
Yeah, exactly, right? But there's there's something very, like, dark about that, how it's like a fairy tale we all know and love, but it's, like, also gonna, like, drag you into the woods and cut you open and cover you in its blood.
Merciless.
I sort of lost my train of thought there a little bit. It's okay, we can move on to the next thing. It'll come back to me. What else did we want to talk about here?
Well, that was just one of my favorite scenes. We were just discussing that one particular one. Okay. But obviously as the film progresses and the characters kind of unravel, there's a lot more to it. And essentially, like, I want to ask you this question. Like, what character did you find most interesting in this whole film?
Okay, well, man, I guess that was kind of my train of thought before. Like, the kids are always the ones that attract evil, right? And this whole movie is focused on the children. I think I think Caleb and Thomason are kind of the two most interesting characters for me.
Okay.
With Thomason kind of edging a little bit ahead of Caleb just because she is the focal point of the film.
Mm-hmm.
But they're interesting because they're dealing with different aspects of sin, being different gender.
Mm-hmm.
And Caleb being a little bit younger, he realizes what like they're destitute, and he is trying to like be a man in like the one scene when he's going to venture into the woods, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, there was just something. Aww. I thought the first time we watched the movie, of course, we don't know how it's going to end, and I thought that I didn't think this was going to be the type of movie where everyone dies type of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And Caleb, I thought Caleb might sort of come out not on top, but
kind of shine through.
And or at least
the person that his father wasn't, kind of thing.
Something along those lines. Yeah,
interesting. Because he is very like, even in the very opening scene, right, when his father turns away from, I don't know who it was, like the leader of their community or their church or whatever, and he basically leads them out of the room.
Caleb's the last one standing.
Caleb is, but no, it's not actually Caleb. He turns to go, and Thomason is still there like this, and he's like, he almost leads her out as if he's almost like guiding her as an elder brother, not a younger brother kind of thing. Yeah. So he is very mature. Right. And the fact that he did want to sneak out that morning, shortly after Samuel is gone, and they fail, because him and his dad do end up trying to go and get meat, and they end up losing their... Oh, no, they don't end up losing their...
He shoots himself in the eye. The gun
that's
backfires.
It. They lose the buck. There's a buck, which I think was probably the witch.
Was that what it was? It was the rabbit. It was the rabbit. He was trying to shoot
right,
the
it was
rabbit.
a rabbit.
Yeah. And then,
so
which is interesting,
witch,
so it's like, oh, like, praise be, like this. I'm like, dude, like, that's like 3 bowls of soup tops, bro. Like, what, you plan on surviving the winter off one rabbit?
I know, right? And then he's just he's not capable. He's not a hunter. He's not able to provide, right?
Yeah.
So that's another reason for Caleb trying to step up and be that person prematurely, because he doesn't even really know what he's doing, and he does end up leading him and Thomason into danger. They end up losing the horse, losing the catch, because they actually did have something in the trap that they had set.
Yeah.
That is another interesting part of the story too, though, because that leads into the father's deception. The fact that they own that trap isn't known to the mother, Catherine. And he ended up, so William, the father, ends up trading Catherine's father's silver cup, so like a family heirloom, unbeknownst to her, and trades it with, I think he says, the natives, right?
Yeah, the local.
Right, the locals. And then, so they end up getting this trap so they can provide some food for themselves, because he can't shoot or shit.
Right.
And then, that comes into play too, because he ends up keeping his mouth shut when Catherine starts blaming Thomason for stealing the cup.
Yeah.
And so
he's a coward.
He is really a coward. Yeah,
he's the
pious
least likable.
He's a coward.
No, he's the
overly
worst.
Pious,
right? Yeah, overly pious as a justification for his shortcomings, basically, right?
Yeah.
And he. But at the same time, it's like you don't expect that from him, because he comes across as just this hardened, grisly, like big bearded, like gnarly kind of dude.
Even his voice, it's like, how do you argue against that voice? Like
it's so deep.
It's so deep.
It's like
it's crazy.
Oh
dude.
Man, it puts Barry White to shame deep.
It kind of does.
Yeah.
And he's just this skinny. Well, he's pretty friggin' ripped, man. Like, there's like tons of scenes of him just chopping the wood.
Chopping wood because he's pissed. He's always mad.
And you know
what's
funny?
He's out there chopping the wood.
That is the only thing we see him be competent at.
Chopping wood?
Yeah. And obviously he builds them a house too, so I guess he can build a house. But you know what I mean?
That was another quick turnaround. They didn't really give, I guess, what they say, 6 months later or something, or 4 months later or something.
Did they give it to him?
I don't remember if they did that or not, but
I didn't catch that.
He whipped up a house and a shed pretty fast.
Yeah. Well, it had to have been a whole harvest, right? I'm assuming they probably left in the spring. And then
built it over the summer.
They built it because they had harvest, right? By the time we see them again, they have all their stocks of corn all ready to go.
And that's another interesting thing about this too, because the fact that their harvest was just dead. Like they basically they had a failed crop, as if the place they were living in next to the wood was like a cursed land.
Yeah,
and that was interesting to me in relation to the fact that the silver cup, because he trades the silver cup with the local indigenous people who have traps in the area. Well, what is their take on this lore?
That's
you know what I mean? Like
they're completely absent in the story,
right? So is this like only seen as a like related to the Christian faith because of the context, and this is a skinwalker to the people that they traded the silver cup with.
Yeah.
Or right? Like, is it just an entity that is evil in general? Or are we dealing with segregations of different like aspects of paranormal activity potentially?
That's
like this is just a movie, but I'm
because-
talking about where it comes from, right?
No,
like
exactly.
the story.
And it's bizarre, right? Because obviously in the closing scenes of the movie, Black Phillip has a conversation with Thomason in which he relates like if you join a pact with the devil is basically what he says, like sign your name here, and he presents her with this book. So that is very obviously a Christian-oriented type of whatever stuff happening.
No, right, but I mean, like, that's because that's her...
So you think that's just her lens
like,
to
that's
view
her
it through.
epistemology, right? Like, she's been brought up as, that like, X, Y, Z, that's all she knows.
To add to that, you see all the women that are performing these rituals are all white.
At the end of the
seemingly.
film. Yeah,
it is firelight, so you can't really see. It's not very clear, and they are definitely... Eggers is very deliberate in what he does not let you see.
That is the most effective part of this film.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you wrote it down here where like, you know, at the end we were going to say, like, would you recommend it or not? I'm jumping to that right now, even if you're not quite there. Because that is what makes or breaks this movie, depending on who's watching it. So, like, we watched it for the first time, all these, like, the cut to black with the scene with Samuel, the showing lots of shadows, the implications of horror, and then the sound, like the audio
more
effects.
visceral,
the audio effects are, like, the biggest part of this film. But, like, we were recommending this movie to my cousin Darren and his wife Vanessa over the Canadian Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah.
And to be totally honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if they hate this movie.
Probably.
Because they are the horror movie people who like
Slasher.
typical horror movie.
Yeah.
Like, they watch
This doesn't give you that satisfaction.
This only gives you the satisfaction
it's a different
if
type
you're
of
willing
horror.
to let your imagination go there. Like, you have to be open to it.
Exactly.
It's not going to give it to you on your own.
No, it's not going to give it to you in your face.
No.
Like a lot of other directorial styles.
This is in your head. This is in your mind.
It is. And a lot of that, it comes from, like you said, right? The auditory effects. And it's interesting because I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Let me see here. Oh, Mark Corvin, sorry. He was the one that wrote the film's score. And this was a quote. He said he wanted it to be tense and dissonant and minimalist.
Definitely was all three of those
It's
things.
interesting because he was acutely aware of how much control Eggers wanted over this film. And so he actually just went with a very loose improvisational form where he knew Eggers could tweak the notes and put them where he wanted them. So, you know, when you get all those like weird strings and stuff, and he actually used all very atypical types of instruments, like a waterphone and a nickel harpa. Nickel harpa. I don't even know what that is.
I don't know.
But everything had to be not electronic. Eggers vetoed all of it.
See, that's what truly made it, like, sound terrifying, because it's always those authentic sounds, right? The strings, the choir. Like, that was the voices. The voices to me were the most impactful in the film, where it's like, and they changed the pitch, right? So it's like this wailing, like this slow building wailing of a female choir, but then half the choir kind of drops it low, and then the other half raises it up way high. And like, I didn't pay attention in music in my up till grade 6 or whenever it was mandatory or whatever, but like that, I don't know what.
It's very dissonant.
Very super effective.
Very cool though.
To me, like, that is the last.
So you're saying you'd recommend it?
I would recommend it
to certain people.
If you are an art student, you'll love it. It's an artsy fartsy film, a little bit.
It kind of is. And the dialogue doesn't lend itself to a lot of mainstream. That's the funny part for me, right? Because Eggers called this like his mainstream, like genre oriented blah 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 film that was like easily digestible, but it's not.
It is not easily digestible.
I'm putting words in his mouth. He didn't actually say that. I'm saying like whatever. Like that would be his version of it.
But like
right?
mainstream.
But like even the dialogue, right? Like the way that
it's essentially
the phraseology
old,
of everything.
It's not Old English, but it's the closest
like
thing to
English.
old. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And it's interesting, too, because he wanted to be so authentic. He did all of his casting in England. And he wanted it to be exactly like how it would have sounded when an English family arrived on the shores of New England.
And that's exactly what that's what it would have been. And what did it make us think of? The Lost Colony episode.
I was like,
because 1630s on the East Coast. What was the year for the Roanoke again?
I believe it was like 1584.
Right. So this isn't really that long after, if you think about it. A few decades.
1484. No, it's 1584.
Yes.
1584.
But the point is, like, early settlement, it's like, well, the potential things that could have happened, the imagination can run rampant.
Definitely.
Anyway.
So, another thing, too, like, you kind of jumped ahead, though. We've kind of talked about our specificities. I don't know if you have any other main points of note or, like, favorite scenes or anything that you found more effective or not effective.
Okay, well...
Was there anything about this movie you didn't like?
No. Honestly, there's nothing I didn't like. There's a few things that I wanted more.
Oh, true. Actually, yeah.
So, for example, the scene with Caleb where he gets lost in the woods and then ends up being essentially beckoned into the witch's lair. Again,
right,
that's
into her
where,
embrace.
Right, and that's where he sticks with his theme of leaving it to the imagination.
Yeah.
Where he's going to kiss the wench, and right as it's about to touch lips or whatever, it turns back into the witch, and you hardly see anything, so it's still left to the imagination.
It's just the hand, the claw you see.
What I would have wanted that I thought would have been really effective there is, like, you still keep the whatever, what's the word I'm looking for? You still keep that darkness and minimalist,
okay.
minimalist, aspect to it. But instead of just cutting from that, you show that it cuts to the witch, that split second where it turns back into the nasty witch, and then have a distant shot where it's almost like the silhouette of that witch hag figure, like doing something not good. No. You know what I mean? Like sucking the life out of Caleb, but like from a distance where you can't quite tell what it is.
Or it's out of focus, and it's literally focused on like a branch, like a leaf blowing.
Sure.
And then you see something
exactly
going on
in the back corner, where it's all blurred or something. Totally. I think that would have been cool. Just added a little extra horror to that scene.
There's like an extended cut.
I wonder.
Deleted scenes.
I don't know why you would cut that one out if they had that in there. But I just thought right in that moment I wanted a little more. I just wanted a little bit more from that scene.
Because then you literally just see him, get like sucked into her embrace.
And then that's it.
And then you get a scene where Thomasin
wakes up.
Well, she doesn't wake up. She goes out. Everyone's upset, obviously.
But that's when right after that scene where that's happening to Caleb, that's nighttime. And then she was unconscious because she got bucked off the horse. Right. And right at the end of that scene is when she kind of like is like, oh, and gets up and then goes and then she runs into her dad.
That's what happened. Right. Because there's always these, exactly. There's these moments of sort of an interlude kind of a feel. And so essentially, she runs into her father's arms. They go home. She's kind of implicated again, right? Because there's another missing child and she was alone with them at the time.
Even though she was doing the responsible thing. Yeah. Caleb was venturing out into the woods. She's the older sister. She's like, I'm coming with you.
And she does honor him by not admitting to everyone openly the secret that he wanted her to keep. Yeah. That's the reason they were going to the woods.
Is the best. She gets the worst end of the stick.
She really does. Because then, even more bizarrely, right? Like, she goes to do the right thing where she's going to put the animals to bed or something. Or I don't know if she was going to milk them, but I think she was putting them to bed. And then she's in there with the sheep and she hears something and then it's pouring rain and she sees her brother. So she's the one who finds him too.
Right.
So in her mother's eyes, she becomes suspicious because she's like, what just happened here? Like, okay, my son's been missing. You were with my youngest infant when he was taken. And now all of a sudden, here's my son, but he's delirious and he's like close to death, essentially.
Yeah.
And you've just brought him back to us.
Right.
So what's going on here?
Right.
And so she is obviously, like, just marred with suspicion.
Right.
Can't even look at her own daughter, who she's already trying to get rid of, mind you, right? She does not like Thomasin. It's weird, right? There's a very bizarre separation between mother and daughter.
Oh, yeah,
it's almost like a jealousy, right?
Because she's the young maiden.
She's the young maiden, and then, she's the older...
Right.
matronly, whatever. That's kind of on the end of her, even though she's cranking out another kid. Like, she was breastfeeding in one of the main scene, well, not the main scene, but in one of the earlier scenes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. I really like that dynamic, though, because that, to me, speaks to another type of sin. Sin against your own flesh and blood. Like, why would you have that kind of hatred? Not hatred so much, maybe a jealousy, you know what I mean? Because, like, there is that conversation where the mother and father are in bed and they think that the kids are asleep, and they're basically discussing trying to find a family for Thomason. Mm-hmm. And, like, I'm not sure. Honestly, you could interpret that, though, as they're just trying to marry her off. Because she is at that age,
That's
right?
kind of like how I interpret it.
Yeah.
It's like one less mouth to feed, give her off to somebody else, and then it's...
outlived her usefuless.
Yeah, and then it's like
and
she might marry
potentially she's a witch,
into...
so let's get rid of her.
Right, get two birds stoned at once, as Ricky would say, right? You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Trailer Park Boys. No, but yeah, I honestly think that's a very interesting dynamic. I feel like that's kind of a little bit more of an old school mentality, too, like the whole mother-daughter kind of thing.
Well, of course, it was 1630.
Yeah, I know. But, anyway. But I think it's very realistic, is all I'm trying to say.
No, totally. No, I agree. I think that definitely added to the tension overall, right? Because there was nothing for Thomason to fall back on. There was no love anywhere. She got it a little bit from her dad, but only because her dad
almost just felt sorry for her or something.
But he was almost just going through the motions.
Yeah.
And same way he was going through the motions with his piousness, with his religion.
Very true. And with his wife especially too, hey? Like, oof.
Oh man, I think he regretted everything. Day one. Just, he's just shaking his head. He's like, you know what, I think I made a few wrong turns.
Well, but that's funny you say that, because Catherine is the one that comes out and says she regrets ever leaving England.
Right.
And so she's like, basically like, F all of you. Like, I don't know why I'm even here. And then she just goes berserk, goes insane, and has a vision, right, where the witch comes to her and bewitches her. This, again... pretty terrifying. Like, this kind of comes close to the baby scene, in my opinion, as far as the scare factor. Because, like, the fact that you're under a delusion that you think you're nursing your newborn infant.
This is what I was going to bring up.
And you're legitimately getting pecked by...
so, like, this is... Yeah, so let me just set this up. Because this is my favorite... This was my favorite scene in the movie. Because totally...
Well,
there
you go. I'm glad we're getting to it.
I think this was the most unsettling visual in the whole film.
Yeah.
Where she's... under the impression that she's talking to Caleb, and Caleb has handed her Samuel, and she's having this vision.
Oh, and this is after Caleb has died.
Right, Caleb has now died. Mm-hmm. He's had basically like a exorcist-like moment where he's speaking, not in tongues, but he's basically mocking Jesus.
Kind of sounds
right?
Like
he's basically like, being like, bathe me in thy kisses, O Lord. And he's like writhing on the ground or whatever. And it's like, they're not quite sure what to make of it all. And then he just dies. Yeah. And it's like, clearly this is like, he's mocking God.
It definitely comes across that way. Yeah.
Which is like, which adds so many elements of like just scary things to this, right? So there's demonic possession, there's a demonic shape-shifting entity in the woods, and then there's also like mind control elements without actually the witch being present even.
Mind control, and she can like conjure visions.
Right, so like you have Catherine sitting in a rocking chair in an empty room, nothing else in the room in that scene without her in a rocking chair,
outheld as if she's holding a baby,
and her boob getting pecked by a crow, or a raven, like bleeding, that's
profusely. And then the next scene, you see her husband. They're both in bed, and he gets up, and he thinks that she's still asleep. But she's not, and her eyes open, and she looks like an insane woman. She looks so scary, because her hair's undone. Yeah. That's one of the telling signs, right? Like, she's a woman undone.
Right.
She has been driven insane by this witch, killing off her kids, because that's essentially what she becomes, just completely inconsolable after the loss of Samuel.
Right.
And so her character is just like, I don't know why I'm here, I don't know why I'm living anymore, like, even though she's got, like, 4 other kids in the house. Which she doesn't even happen to notice her 2 twins. Like, it's like the whole movie. She
just lets them go. It's like, just go out to the barn. And then they literally lock them in the barn. They lock the twins and Thomason in the barn. They're like, you know what? We can't trust any of you kids.
No.
Can't trust any of you kids these days. It's like, oh.
So they're all sleeping in the barn.
Not going to take any responsibility, are ya?
No.
Like, you're just going to lock your kids in the barn.
That's bizarre to me too, because they were they were almost hexed themselves, right?
They were.
Because as soon as Caleb dies in the room, they similarly just dropped to the ground. And I honestly, the first time we watched it, I thought they died too. Because they were speaking in tongues, right? They weren't making any sense. And then not Samuel. Caleb was going off about his kind of mocking the Lord and all this stuff.
And you know what? That actually I just had a realization here, because I wrote down, I was like, well, at what point along the way here does Thomason actually kind of become under the spell of the witch? And it's not really until the very end.
It's not. Yeah.
They make you think that it could be earlier on, where it's like possibly like even the scene with Mercy,
the milking of the
that where the blood comes out, or with Mercy even where she's saying that she's a witch. I just think they're right at the wood, and I just picture the witch standing 20 feet away, like watching all that, almost controlling that situation.
Yeah, almost.
But that scene with Caleb where he dies and the twins go down on the ground, and you think that they're faking it. But they're actually not.
But then Thomason's implicated again because she's the one standing up.
And that's the whole point. That's why that's why the witch has made them do that, or the devil, or whatever.
So that it looks like it's Thomason.
Right. The question, I guess, with me paranormal-wise with this movie is there two kind of things going on here. Like, is the goat controlled by the witch, or is the witch its own demonic entity, and then it's also just wherever the region they're in, or however, there's a demon in this goat too. That's like kind of helping the situation along here.
I honestly think that
because it's like a male voice in the goat. The
devil, I would call it. I think the devil is Black Phillip in Black Phillip's form, right? But he is taking other forms too, right? In the form of perhaps other farm animals and other farms nearby, and little settlers that are making their little homesteads. And then essentially, I honestly, that's what I feel is the most. Okay, so he is almost like the overlord, the spirit that can inhabit different creatures, different whatever. And then you get him influencing and taking over exactly that. Like, he almost has like a band of witches now.
Right. Because
he has a book, and there was other signatures in the book, right? When you see it opened up.
Yeah.
And then you see in the very last scene, right? There's probably about a dozen or so
and
naked
they all start
women
floating up in the air.
And they all, they have the power of Black Phillip within them, or the devil or whatever. And they're all under his same spell, though. It's just one big cult of witches. That's my take on it. I don't know. What's your take on it, people at home?
Yeah, let's hear it. Anyway, that brings us to the end.
I think so, because really the only thing we haven't touched on is exactly that. So you get Caleb dying, you get the twins being bewitched, you get them all locked in the same room in the barn, and then you get the father. Well, before even the father wakes up, you have that scene, right, where essentially the witch is sucking the side of the sheep and then
eating it.
She's just eating it.
Eating.
But the sheep is completely fine. Like, it's not even.
It's like in
reacting.
A trance. It's just like letting itself be eaten.
It honestly probably thinks it's nursing its young too. That's what I'm imagining. And then you get where it turns on the two twins, and then you get the scene where the mother, like I said, she's a woman undone. Her eyes open up and like she's almost like in just like some sort of crazy rage or something. I don't even know. You see her bloody boob, and then the father is basically stunned by what he sees outside, right? Because his entire farmyard is destroyed. and then just like boom, he's just impaled by Black Phillip.
Yeah.
And then he basically, his demise is soon after.
Yeah.
And then you basically get the scene where Thomason is attacked violently by her mother and is forced to kill her.
Yeah.
and then that's where she almost goes into a shock, and she goes back into the cabin, falls asleep. So you get these transitions, right? I feel like the day to night, like, I feel like Eggers used that very effectively to sort of juxtapose things and to sort of create those transitions that are very natural and minimalist.
Definitely.
And it's almost like, naturalist style that is more of a implied sort of thing. Like, it's for me, it was brilliant. I loved it.
I loved it too.
And I thought it was totally effective.
Definitely.
And
so
I would recommend it.
I mean, of course, you guys listening, we hope you've watched it already.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts on it too. So,
and even if you haven't, and even though there's a billion spoilers in this, go watch it anyway. It's definitely worth it. If you were just listening to this,
we can't do it
nothing else to listen
here
to,
with
but
our descriptions here.
no, and we want to know what you guys think, because there's a lot of cool aspects to this. It was definitely a different kind of a film. It's different than some of the other ones we have that we're going to cover.
Yeah.
Such as The Thing, or Hold the Dark, or The Ritual.
The Ritual. That was freaky.
We got a long list, and we've had some really awesome suggestions from you guys. Donnie Darko.
Because we have to. Portals, time travel, anyways.
And keep them coming. So shoot us ideas.
Yeah.
Get us on Facebook on Into the Portal Podcast forum. You can email us at Into the Portal mailbox at gmail.com. At Into the Portal Podcast on basically everything else, on Instagram and everything else. So hit us up.
Come join the forum. We love to. We just want to get the conversation rolling. So
we really do.
Yeah.
So we hope you enjoyed this, and we hope you're spooked. We hope you believe in witchcraft. Although, just beware if you're walking into the woods.
Let's keep it in the 1630s, folks.
Yeah. So until Sunday.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Mm-hmm.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.